Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 29. First of all, I would like to thank you for being patient while I was getting back in shape. I was pretty much fine for the last 2 weeks at this point, but I'll be honest, I was completely distracted by Helldivers 2. That game consumed my free time completely, and only now I'm at the point where I can get back into making videos. As for this particular episode, I'm not entirely sure what to expect. I recorded this while I was still in the early days of my health issues, and I don't really remember what I have on file at this point. All I remember is that we just started launching construction rockets, and that I will be moving some of our factories off-world. Other than that, it will be a bit of a blur. Before we get started, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel, and clicking the like button will let me know that this video was worth making. If you want to help me make a living off this one day, please consider becoming a channel member, where you will get an early access to the videos as I make them, and for a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description. But enough talking, let's get into it. I guess I will be looking ahead as I do the commentary. Usually, I do this at most a day after the recording, so the memory of the session is still fresh in my mind, making it easy to write what I want to say. Now, it's a bit more detached. Anyways, I remember having to fly to Minerva at the start. The fog placed a base near some relatively undefended infrastructure, so it had to be dealt with before we did anything else. If I'm honest, I am tempted to completely reclaim this place for ourselves. Now that we are building the sphere, having that hive around Olympus would only lower the overall efficiency of its power generation. Maybe having the dark fog farm in some other system would be more beneficial, and leave the systems with a sphere free of the swarm. As for our sphere-related performance issues, I tried to keep all 3 layers visible in the game world, but it is simply too much of a hit, so I cannot keep them on and still maintain a playable frame rate. I will only turn them on whenever I want to show off the progress of the construction, but outside those moments, they will be kept invisible. It not only made the game uncomfortable to control, but it also lowered the simulation rate. Sadly, it cannot be helped. As for our next objective, it will be the addition of the chemical labs to the mall. At this point, we have access to the upgraded building, which is faster than the Tier 1 version. I decided to move the graphene and carbon nanotube production away from Juno. Those are the materials we are struggling the most with right now, so giving them their own planets will be quite beneficial. That's the original chemical labs taken care of. Now we need to upgraded ones, which will help us save on the amount of buildings we will need to keep the arrays as efficient as possible. And it is quite important that we use them. If we want to fully saturate a Tier 3 belt with carbon nanotubes, for example, we would need 60 Tier 1 labs, but only 30 upgraded ones. Needless to say, that's a pretty big improvement. Also, as you can see, I started to move away from using belts in the mall. It will not be possible to only use storage boxes for every factory, but whenever possible, this kind of an arrangement will be better for us. Now we just need to set up some delivery targets in our inventory, so the bots can take care of the job of keeping us fully stocked with these labs. To keep the factory outposts powered, we will also need a good supply of fusion reactors. We cannot build the end-game generators just yet, so we are forced to rely on the second best. Since we are so close to the end now, I opted not to build a separate factory for them on the mall. We should be using antimatter cells soon enough. Okay, I think that should be enough for the time being. Let's just put the leftover components back into the towers, and we can move on. Well, we will need to sort out this battery charger sooner or later, so might as well do it now. We will need a lot more orbital harvesters in the not too distant future, so it would be best if we did this now, instead of when it's too late. We only really need to add a factory to make the empty batteries, which will be sent over to the charger, and the full ones will be carried over to the harvester factory. Oh great! We are also out of logistic bots. Those are also something that we should be having in the mall, but handcrafting them should be good enough for now. Okay, the batteries are being charged. And the full ones are now being used to make the harvesters. Our work here is done for the time being. We will need to revisit it to make sure the bots are in the distributors, but it's working, so it's good enough. What we need next are shields. In order to set up the factory planets, we will need a way to keep them safe. For that, we only need shields. If you remember, we can achieve 100% safety from relay station landings with just 8 emitters, and the only way for the swarm to get around them would be to launch an attack from space. And since we will not be building spheres in systems where our manufacturing planets will be, we will not be raising the threat level of the hives for this to be a problem. Since the Lambda Leonis system is nearby, it has no enemy presence, and it has several planets we can exploit. It is a prime candidate for our first off-world manufacturing centers. Now we need to find a nice big open space to start building our factories. I think we will do the graphene first. We will need that to make the nanotubes anyway. But before that, we need to place down the defenses. Once I'm done with this, I will make a blueprint off it, just so we don't need to do this manually all the time. We need more shields, so let's put them on the front of the crafting queue. The bots can wait a little. Okay, that's the shields taken care of. They will be a huge drain on the local power grid for quite a while, but it's important that they are fully charged. Now come the actual factory. Unfortunately, I didn't pick up any of the chemical labs before I left, but we should have plenty of them ready to go by now. Almost 200 labs should be enough for 1 or 2 arrays of graphene. Before we start the factory, let's make sure it has the power to actually work as intended. A couple more columns of reactors should do the trick. Lovely. The shields are up, and we have a bit of surplus generation the factory can take advantage of. Thankfully, it seems the equator is relatively free of minerals, so we can build more or less without obstacles. Now, I did make quite a few blueprints between episodes. I managed to take care of them just before I fell ill. They should be at the perfect ratios, without using proliferators or the new dark fog fabricators. They are some good old-fashioned arrays with no bells or whistles. I might do a perfectly proliferated playthrough one day, but this one is not that kind of a series. And the first shipment of fire ice is being brought in. The only issue I can foresee with this setup is the hydrogen. At this point in time, we have no place to dump them. I suppose we could use one of the other planets to make the Casimir crystals. Those eat up a lot of it, so having them nearby would be quite helpful. Not to mention the fractionators, we can place those on the fourth planet if necessary. Anyways, I did rename the planet to Graphene while I was talking. That will make it a whole lot easier to find it whenever we need to. Now we just need a couple hundred belts to finish this construction, and then we can move on to the next project. Later on, I would love to set up some polar delivery outposts, where we could bring in the building materials we need to keep expanding the local arrays, but for now, we need to fly back to Olympus to restock. Maybe having 3,000 belts in our inventory, instead of 1,500, that might help with these kinds of shortages. And there. We now have a total of 8 fully saturated belts worth of graphene being made on this planet. Once we are back on Juno, we can safely dismantle that old array, and rely on this exclusively. As for our next project, that will be the nanotubes, of course. That barren moon-like planet looks like the ideal candidate. Oh, wait. We will need to set up the shields, and I forgot to make a blueprint. Let's jump back to the previous place to quickly make it. We cover the placements, exclude everything apart from the emitters, and bam, we have the shield blueprint ready to go. We will also need the polar outpost for the power. This place would be quite useless without that. Now, I will start setting up the power poles going to the shield emitters, but it will be a bit more tedious than I anticipated, and we'll give up on it soon. Also, not having all the shields we need to achieve full coverage doesn't help matters either. There. That should get the ball rolling with the nanotube production. I did seriously consider using the exotic resources to make these, but mining those can be a bit of a pain if I'm honest. They are usually found on ocean planets, and those can be a real hassle, having to set up the infrastructure for mining while carefully placing foundations. Not even the advanced miners can alleviate that. Before we go home to pick up the remaining buildings, let's just finish what we can now. Before we go to warp, we should rename the planet, so it will be easier to aim for it as we come back. These arrays are no longer useful to us. We can start emptying out the towers, and then dismantle them to make room for other things. When I made the recording, the idea of placing the Casimir crystal factories in the Lambda Leonis system did not yet occur to me, so I ended up building a couple arrays on Juno instead. But it's safe to say that these will end up moving to our neighboring star system in either the next episode, or in one not long after that. These arrays are not yet optimized to take the tower stacking into consideration, so they are a bit on the shorter side. They consume a lot of hydrogen, and they are optimized with no stacking in mind. And speaking of stacking, this recording was made just a couple days before the new stacker inserters were added to the game, that's why I didn't use them yet. Not 100% sure I will make use of them in big numbers in this playthrough, but I can definitely see the immense utility they bring to the game. Oh, right. We can also get rid of this old crystal array. The new ones are more than capable of taking over its duties. We are just barely below the 100% threshold for power generation. Adding a couple more generators to a few columns should do the trick. Okay, time to sort out the remaining constructions on the Nanotube planet. Apart from the shield emitters. Those can wait, that system is not an immediate danger, plus I didn't feel like messing with the power distribution. At this point, we are making more nanotubes than ever before. This will surely boost our sphere frame production, which will in turn allow us to build more rocket launchers, speeding up the construction speed. At this point in the game, it's all about expanding to make things go faster. Well, we have about 500 photons ready to go. It's not even nearly enough to rely on them for power generation, so instead, we will use them to make the final research cubes, also known as universal matrices. They are the ones we will use for the infinite research projects. The first step in that process is the refining. The photons themselves are not usable, but after they go through the particle accelerators, they can be turned into antimatter, which is used to make the white cubes. In the meantime, our space fleet expansion technologies have been ticking away in the background. As I've said, we will very likely end up cleaning out the dark fog from our home system, and not allow them to leech any power off from our sphere. Thankfully, it is pretty easy to wipe them out once the final combat drone is researched. Even without the corresponding upgrades, they are perfectly capable of getting rid of the hive, but if we spend some time researching those upgrades, our losses can be kept to a minimum. And we have antimatter. Now we just need to bring all the different colored cubes together with it, and we can start making the universal matrices. And our sphere is still only capable of satisfying the ray receivers to 14%, and 14 megawatts are being leached off by the local dark fog hive. Not a big amount all things considered, but it's more than zero, so it's an unacceptable amount. Well, this oil well is right where we want to build the next set of matrix labs. It's not really ready for demolition quite yet, but the labs are more important, so it can be sacrificed for that. Next, we will use the resource slots in the tower to bring in the antimatter. After that, we will use a second tower to deliver the different cubes, but I suppose we could just belt them in from the neighboring labs. They are close enough for that. We just might do that in the next episode. I highly doubt that what I'm building here is permanent, more of a proof of concept than anything else. The only thing missing now are the green cubes. The severe lack of quantum processors is having an impact on their manufacturing, so that is something that we will need to sort out in the next episode. But for now, let's just quickly sort it out by hand. I just want to see some white cubes being made before we sign off. And we have universal matrices. It's only a tiny trickle at this point, but there will come a time when it will be flowing in massive quantities. And that is pretty much it. Once again, I would like to thank you for being patient during my absence, and I should be back to making videos from now on. As for the future of the series, I think I can continue with it. There is simply no way I would give up on it this close to the end. We still need to start launching the solar sails, so we can start filling in the gaps between the structural elements, which will further increase the power output. Not as much as the nodes and the struts, but every little bit helps. Apart from that, we will continue moving some of our factories off Juno. As gaps start to appear in our supply chain, we will plug them with off-world outpost, instead of trying to cram everything onto our home planet. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel, and clicking the like button will also help letting me know that the video was worth making. If you would like to help me make a living off this one day, please consider becoming a channel member, where you will get an early access to the videos as I make them. And if you want to give a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next one.